Michael Vogt. I'm a curator at the Iowa Gold Star Military Museum located out at historic Camp Dodge, Iowa. What it means to do history comes in a number of flavors, so to speak. It might be spending time in an archive to compile research for an article for publication, or to write an exhibit label or an introductory panel for an exhibit. Sometimes doing history is analyzing a uniform that visitors to the museum might bring in. Don't know anything about my father. He didn't talk about his service in World War II. What can you tell me? And so we look at the patches, we look at the ribbons, so we can sometimes avail ourselves of the Iowa Department of Veterans Affairs at Camp Dodge, look up some records and send them home with a little more, of a detailed context of their relative service during the Second World War. So that's very rewarding. Oftentimes it's just answering questions. Sometimes it's running a flight simulator. Sometimes it's leading tours. Sometimes it's going out and giving talks to civic groups. So I sort of consider myself as a bit of a generalist as far as a historian or a historical practitioner. When I think most significantly about Iowans' role in the war, although it would be a minority numbers-wise, the Iowa National Guard was drawn up into the 34th Division as the larger parent unit. They arrived in Ireland in spring of 1942. They end up arriving in Africa, some of their units, in November of 42 as part of Operation Torch, and they serve and fight across North Africa and up the Italian peninsula. So they were the first the 34th was the first U.S. division to arrive in Europe, and it included almost all of the Iowa units of the Iowa National Guard. So they fought from one of our first landings in Europe to the very end of the war, the surrender in Italy and of the Axis powers in Europe. A unique Iowa story that I recall was a gentleman that was a prisoner of war in Germany. He grew up on a farm in Iowa where they raised hogs, and dysentery, which is a nasty medical affliction, chronic diarrhea. He remembered his hogs on the farm having cholera, and the solution to that was to mix in charcoal with the hog feed, and it would cure that. When men in his barracks got dysentery, he remembered his time on the farm and how they cured it with the hogs, and he told his buddies, he said, "We need to take charcoal out of the stove here in the barracks, grind it up, mix it in with our rations, and eat that charcoal, and that'll probably cure it." Some men in his barracks died. The ones that ate the charcoal, because of his experience on an Iowa farm, ended up saving their lives. I think about in the Second World War the unique roles that Iowa locations and Iowans played. Robert Losey, for example, was an advisor in Norway and perished in a bombing attack, and he can be credited, unfortunately, as the first U.S. casualty of World War II. We think about oftentimes the Sullivan brothers, who perished when the USS Juneau was sunk in August of 42. The Women's Army Auxiliary Corps at Fort Des Moines, they were the first women to enter the military outside of the Army Nurses Corps, which was established in the early 20th century, but in August of 42, the first women marched off the parade grounds at Fort Des Moines. The Meskwaki code talkers, most people think about Navajo code talkers when they hear that phrase. There were actually 18 different tribes, the Meskwaki among them. They served with the Iowa National Guard based out of Marshalltown with Company H of the 168 Infantry. So when I think of, Kermit Tyler is an Army Air Force lieutenant stationed at Pearl Harbor, and he drew late night duty, early morning duty on 7 December 1941. And when the radar operator said, "We've got something big on the screen coming in," all he knew was that there were a flight of B-17s that were supposed to arrive from the mainland. He said, "Don't worry about it." So Iowans were there from the very beginning. When the war ended in August of 1945, an Iowan from Marshalltown, Frank Jack Fletcher, who was a Navy admiral, accepted the formal surrender of the Northern Islands of Japan. So Iowans are on the scene from beginning to the end.